Hi there and welcome to another video. This is Gina from McGuire. So I've done many videos in the past showing ways to get the look of letterpress using supplies you likely already have. However, today's die cut letterpress technique is definitely the closest I've ever found to getting that real letterpress look. It's very easy to do and you can use almost any die for this technique. So I'm going to show you several examples today, and hopefully this is something that you'll give a try. I am using the Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cut machine today. I am currently trying out a bunch of different die cut machines since the one that I usually use is kind of hard to find right now. And this one is small and compact, but very mighty. So I'm using this today and I'm really pleased with the results. So if you're looking for small and at a good price point, you might want to check this one out. I also am starting out with the Spellbinders Dog Club dies, and I picked two of these little doggies, and I'm going to die cut a few from white cardstock. The white cardstock I am using is Neenah 110 pound Classic Crest. This is a pretty heavyweight cardstock. You will have to experiment for this technique to see how many layers you need depending on what die cut machine you're using and how heavyweight your cardstock is. But once you've tested it, then you're good, and you can do this technique over and over again once you figure out how many layers you need. I'll explain more about determining how many layers you need during this video. This is also a great way to use up some cardstock scraps. So I cut 3 white die cuts here, it doesn't matter what color, from 110 pound cardstock, and I'm gluing them together, I'm stacking them together. You need to create like a thick piece to do this technique. Then on the back of your die cut, stacked die cut, you need to put a vellum piece. I found vellum was best for transferring ink, so that's why I chose vellum. You could also try acetate, but I found ink kind of bubbled up on that, and vellum seemed to be the perfect medium to transfer the ink. So here you can see me stacking all of my die cuts together. I use a quickie glue pen since it doesn't add bulk between the layers. It just glues them together enough to be able to do the technique. So this stacked piece of 3 cardstock pieces and 1 vellum is what I call a letterpress element. It's going to help you do this letterpress technique. I repeated the same process for a small dog die cut too. So I have a large and a small dog ready to do letterpress. Again, I'm using the Spellbinders machine, but you can use any die cut machine for this. You want to set up your die cut machine as you would for an embossing folder, but instead you're going to use an embossing mat. So this is the embossing mat. I get mine from Spellbinders. I've used it for years and love it. If you do not have one, you could use a piece of craft foam there instead. I then put down my paper that I want to create for the card. I put down my 2 letterpress elements. And for this machine, I put the embossing plate on top. I'm going to run this through my machine, and what's happening is those letterpress elements we created are pressing into the paper thanks to that embossing mat that we have, that brown mat there. Now, if you have a different die cut machine, you can definitely do this technique, but you do need an embossing mat or you need a piece of craft foam. There you can see how it pressed into the paper. So now we're going to do it with ink so we get that letterpress look. So again, I have my embossing mat down, then my piece of white cardstock. This is 110 pound Neenah white cardstock. I'm going to ink up the side with the piece of vellum with Hero Art's soft brown ink. You could use any dye ink for this. I don't think pigment ink works as well as dye ink, so any kind of dye ink is best. Then you're going to carefully place that down onto your paper. Make sure not to shift it or the ink will mess up. And you can go ahead and do any other elements too. Here I'm doing this smaller doggy also. Place that right next to that. Then you carefully put the embossing plate on top of that and run it through. Again, it depends on what machine you have as far as the sandwich goes. But whatever sandwich you use to do an embossing folder, you just switch out with the embossing pad. So there you can see how those letterpress elements pressed into the paper and left ink behind. That ink will smooth out and soften over time and give beautiful results. Now I want to show you a bunch of other examples too, because I think the more you see it, the more you learn, and I learned some things along the way too. Here I have a hello die from Spellbinders. I die cut this time 2 hellos, since this is pretty intricate. So I did 2 hello white cardstock pieces with the vellum die cut piece on the back of it. So I have a stack of vellum, cardstock. And I glued each layer together with the quickie glue pen. The reason I only used 2 pieces of cardstock this time is because these are more intricate dies. Doing the same with the Spellbinders Lavender swag here, where I did 2 cardstock pieces with vellum on the back. So we're going to repeat the process again, but this time I'm going to use watercolor paper. I found watercolor paper works so much better for this letterpress technique because you don't get cracking in between the letterpress areas. I use Tim Holtz watercolor paper because it's very soft and it's bright white, but you can try any watercolor paper you may have. There's even letterpress paper out there. So sorry I got my head there in the way, but I did soft pool on the large die cut, and then on the hello I did Gina K Peach Bellini, which is a beautiful peach color. I was careful not to shift it, run it through, and look at that beautiful impression you get with these letterpress elements that we're creating. And that vellum transfers that ink beautifully. Next, I'm going to use the Poppies pocket die. Now this is meant to die cut and then wrap around the front of a card so you have like a pocket, like a see-through pocket. But I'm going to use it a little bit differently today. I thought it was such a beautiful die. I didn't think it would turn out great for this technique, but it's by far amazing. My favorite of all the techniques. This die is fantastic. So what I did is I die cut 2 of these from white cardstock, 110 pound, and then also from vellum, and I glued all 3 together. On the vellum side, I'm pressing some Hero Arts soft pool ink once again. So I'm basically inking it up like a stamp. Once it's all inked up, I'm going to lay it down onto my watercolor paper, which is sitting on my embossing mat, and run that through my die cut machine. This will make an impression in the paper and leave that soft pool ink behind. Now I tried this out with dark color inks, light colored inks. I like the look of the light color ink because it looks more true letterpress, but you can use dark inks if you want to. And there you can see that beautiful texture you get. Now the beautiful thing about this technique is you can do it over and over. So I wiped off that soft pool ink, and this time I'm going to ink it up with a Peach Bellini ink from Gina K, that same beautiful peach ink that I love so much. Going to ink it up, lay it down onto another piece of watercolor paper, and run it through. So you can mass produce this very easy. The one thing I do recommend is to not clean off the vellum with something wet because it'll just soak into the cardstock layers of your letterpress element and kind of make it messy. So just use a dry cloth when you're wiping off that vellum and switching colors. Look how beautiful that color ink is with that letterpress technique. Now for this last example with this particular letterpress element that I created, I'm using 3 ink colors. So I have the yellow, the peach, and the pool, and I'm overlapping a little bit between so that I have like an orange and a green also. Now I'm going to go ahead and letterpress this, and I get a beautiful rainbow of colors. Now you could, again, use this with any dye inks you may have, but I do recommend dye inks over pigment inks because the pigment ink doesn't transfer as well. However, I bet you money that the Distress Oxide inks would work great for this too. So here you can see the beautiful rainbow effect you get by using multiple inks. So you can use multiple letterpress elements that you create or multiple inks. The sky is the limit with this one. So here I use the Spellbinders little plant dies to create my letterpress elements. I'm going to ink each one up with a different color and lay it down on my watercolor paper very carefully so I don't shift the color. Now again, each of these little elements here were made by layering 2 pieces of die cut cardstock with 1 layer of vellum. You will have to test a little bit. So what you want to do is maybe put 2 or 3 pieces of cardstock with a piece of vellum, run it through with a piece of scrap paper, see how it impresses. If it presses too much that it kind of tears the paper between, then you know you need to remove one of your cardstock pieces. But I found in most cases, 2 pieces of heavyweight cardstock with 1 piece of vellum did the trick. But again, you'll want to test it out. Never force anything through your machine. Usually you can figure it out in 1 or 2 tries. So these again have 2 pieces of cardstock with 1 piece of vellum on the back. That vellum side I inked up, placed it onto my watercolor paper and ran it through. You can also try different cardstocks to use for your impression. I did find that the Tim Holtz watercolor paper looked beautiful. And check out that gorgeous letterpress look you get. Now for this one, I decided just to do thank you by itself, keep the card simple, but blend again inks together. So here I have 2 white die cut thank yous from cardstock with vellum on the back. I'm inking up that vellum side with the inks, lay it down on the paper and run it through, and you get a beautiful blended look. So you can see how this is something that once you set it up, you can mass produce very easily. Now you could leave these as is for a very true letterpress look, but I decided to go over all of the inked areas, all the impressed areas, with my clear Wink of Stella shimmer pen, just to add some sparkle. You definitely could skip this if you want to, but I felt like it added a lot to these simple cards. So now that I have a bunch of letterpress pieces together, it's time to make them into cards, and I decided to keep them very simple. For all of the panels, I trimmed them down a little bit and glued them onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. Now I also added a small sentiment on some of the cards. I used the Simon Says stamp Kind Flowers stamp set for a few of them. I actually used this stamp set in my last video, but I like it so much I decided to use it again. So I used some of the small long sentiments on the bottom. Now for the 3 cards that I created using that large Poppy Spellbinders die for the letterpress, I decided to add a simple hello with a small sentiment strip. So you can see the hello on my card. That is just 3 die cuts of hello covered with silver embossing powder on the top, so it has some nice shine. I glued that to the card and then used foam tape to glue my little sentiment strip right below it. Now I didn't want to add too much to this, so the only pop of color I added is a tiny little heart die cut right at the end of our sentiment strip. I felt like that added a little something to it, but didn't distract too much from the background. I put some Nouveau drops on top of the heart just for a little bit of dimension and shine. And that's all I did to these large Poppy letterpress cards. And you can see the ink really transferred well off the vellum. I tried a bunch of different things, but I felt vellum gave the best results. Okay, here are the 2 cards that I created using the Little Plants dies from Spellbinders. One I did yellow, one I did peach, but I wanted to keep them very simple, so I added tiny little white Nouveau drops around them. Now the sentiment that I used on this is from the Birch Press Hooray Everything stamp set. I really love the sentiments in here and that there's a coordinating die set available. Now for this one, I use that Lavender Swag die from Spellbinders, but if you look closely, I put tiny little white Nouveau drops into the little letterpress area of that die, just to add a little bit of interest to it. I also stamped a Simon Says stamp Kind Flower sentiment right underneath the hello. Here's a super simple one. This just has the letterpress thank you. I trimmed it down a little bit and put it on a craft note card, and it's good to go. You could add some accents to this, but I feel like the simplicity of it is really nice. Here is the hello. This was an added one that I did just because I had my little element ready to go. So I just did the letterpress hello using the peach ink, and then I gold heat embossed a greeting underneath it from this My Favorite Things Bitty Bears stamp set. Some of these stamp sets like this, especially from My Favorite Things, have a lot of great little sentiments that work well with these dies. Now here's the first card I made with the letterpress doggies. I love these doggies. I used a sentiment underneath it that was just perfect. It's from the My Favorite Things Friends Forever stamp set. I think it's fun to find sentiments from stamp sets that I have that work well with my dies. Here I used the Spellbinders Etched Snowflake dies to create a quick thank you card. So you can see I did the letterpress technique with the snowflakes and that same thank you die to create this one, and I added white Nouveau drops. And here we have the 3 backgrounds I did with the Poppy die. I did a different color strip on each of these with a different color heart, but on all of them I did the stacked hello die cuts with the silver embossing on top. This one I think you could even leave more simple than this and just do a simple stamped element up in the white area, but I decided to add a little bit of dimension to it. As you can see from this video, you can really do this technique with pretty much any dies you may have. I hope you'll give it a try. You can get some beautiful, simple looks. All the supplies that I used today are linked in my YouTube description below. Go to my blog for better photos of each of the cards that I created. In the middle are a couple other letterpress techniques that I've done in the past. I hope this was helpful to you. Hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I appreciate you spending time with me today. Have a wonderful week.